This is why your man is thinking about the Roman Empire every day. You may have seen this trend going around social media where a man's partner will ask them how often they think about the Roman Empire. The man typically responds something like every day, or every couple days, or multiple times a day, and the response is always like absolute shock from their partner. Personally, as an amateur history buff, I feel very much read for filth by this whole trend. So where did this thing come from? Why is it spread so quickly? And why is your man thinking so much about the Roman Empire? I've seen folks try and throw out loads of different explanations. Maybe it's some inner form of wish fulfillment to imagine yourself leading legions and conquering foes in the name of empire. Some have suggested some connections to a stoic John Wayne-style machismo inherent in it, the cool anger of a quiet man that the Roman Empire embodies, especially when you imagine the classic conquests of the screaming quote-unquote barbarian Gauls and Germans. Maybe it's just thinking about things like gladiatorial fights. The Ridley Scott film about them was built on striking images of the spectacle, making it seem like it would be the height of badassery to be a gladiator. The Roman Empire is filled with aesthetics that someone trending masculine could latch onto and think they're cool enough to come to mind regularly. That alone could account for a large part of what this phenomenon is all about, and it's without a doubt a part of the equation, but I don't think that's all. Here's what I think. Yes, the Roman Empire embodies a cool Peaky Blinders-esque masculinity that offers this perfect blend of escapist wish fulfillment fantasy. But also, the Roman Empire specifically, as an institution, has cultural elements that are all over our day-to-day life, from our government to our legal systems to our architecture to our movies. But the Roman Empire was hardly the first empire to spread out across the world, nor would it be the last. There were the Assyrians, the Achaemenid Persians, and Alexander the Great before them. And there were the Huns, and the Mongols, the Ottomans, the British, and loads of other empires during and after. While these empires all have their stands, nothing quite captures the imagination like the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire specifically, more than any other empire throughout history, strikes closest to the heart of what a modern man might find appealing and relatable. But why is that? Is there something inherently different about the Roman Empire that makes it so striking to the modern eye, particularly of the boyfriend or husband variety? I don't think it's what's different. I think it's what's inherently similar. The Roman Empire had the most modern-feeling social infrastructure of nearly any imperial contemporary. First, it originally and for much of its history was not ruled by an emperor, it was ruled by a senate. Even well into the reign of the emperors, the senate still remained, even if it existed as more of a phantom limb of the previous system. This background in democracy grounds itself in the modern mind as a modern system. Though their system had a more firm class structure to determine representation, it's still very reminiscent of modern government styles and contains many parallels to the pitfalls that our own governments fall into. Rome, before the empire, was divided into a two-party system, the Optimates and the Populares. These two were often locking horns and preventing legislation from going through. Even legislation that was agreed upon by both sides could be denied simply because it would grant the senator who backed it far too much gravitas. That's the word I think we need to latch onto here to understand our modern fascination with the Romans. Gravitas was the Roman way to describe a person's honor, fame, and stature within Roman society. It's social capital and social etiquette. Having gravitas means one expects and demands respect. And it sounds like the kind of reputation a modern man might dream or fantasize about commanding. But that's just another fantasy, so we come back around to the question, is this whole phenomenon just a male power fantasy? Well, it's definitely part of it, I won't deny that. Knowing dudes and knowing myself, the fantasy is enough to get your mind drifting towards the Roman Empire. Commanding troops, commanding respect, advancing your ambitions, fighting with other hardened men, and brutal combat whether you're in the legions or the gladiatorial arena. If you're the kind of guy to fantasize about that sort of thing, the Roman Empire is the best place to land. But here's the other piece of the puzzle, and it has to do with the similarities between the Romans and ourselves, because there's an anachronism there as well. We don't have the exact same society that the Romans did. While America has, and to some degree continues to dip their toes into imperialism, it's just never quite fit our anti-imperialism mythos based on our founding and our Declaration of Independence. The question of whether or not to engage in imperialism has dogged the United States since its founding. But to the Romans, empire wasn't a question, it was an answer, both economically and culturally. While we may live in a world similar to that of the Romans in terms of infrastructure and democratic problems, we don't solve those problems like a Roman would. In Rome, the most influential politicians were the generals, not simply due to their reputation and the respect due to them, but because they commanded the loyalty of hardened veteran legionaries who owed their generals that loyalty because they were personally rewarded by them. We don't have that sort of system. You can get some political backing as a veteran in America, but it's really not necessary to gain office. And unlike Rome, where the goal of reaching the highest offices of rank was a necessary step in order to gain military command in the ranks of consul or proconsul, career soldiers are the ones who command our armies. And we just don't have too many previous generals in office these days. In America, our chief executive, while a military leader, doesn't personally command the armies and isn't personally enriched by combat through slaves and loot. It's just a completely different mindset than the Romans, since gaining that power from military command was all leading towards self-enrichment and empowerment that you could get by running a successful campaign. The way our politicians enrich themselves is subtler, but only marginally less unscrupulous. That sort of makes it seem like men are just yearning for a simpler time when one could truly make a name for oneself by the strength of their arms or the sweat of their backs. In a way, there is truth to that yearning, as we're seeing the siphoning of wealth from the lower classes into the top 1%. Wages aren't keeping up with inflation, and home ownership is becoming a distant dream, such that one might be forgiven for imagining a life where one could earn a living wage and eventually gain a plot of land and a home by fighting with a legion alongside their fellow soldiers and an esteemed, respected general. Obviously, this is a fantasy, and even at the time, the economy of Rome was not so simple or clear-cut. But there's truth to the impetus of the fantasy, if not the fantasy itself. Maybe it is those economic stressors, the monotony of an office job, or just the fascination with the time period and aesthetics that leads your man to think about the Roman Empire every day. Or it could be that the Roman Empire occupies space in nearly every facet of our modern world. Not only are there infrastructural similarities like I mentioned earlier, you only need to look at a modern law textbook to get a crash course in Latin. Look at our military ranks, our athletic and celebrity culture. Look at the designs of our buildings and stadiums. If you were at Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, or if you've been to a football game, then you were likely in a stadium based on the design philosophies of the Colosseum. There are examples in our language, our calendar, our media. So many books and movies that have an empire in them model that empire off the Romans. So even if you're thinking about some fantasy empire like the one in Skyrim, then you're tangentially thinking about the Romans after all. If you engage with any of these things, or many of the other hidden relics of the Roman Empire, then you're living in their bones. It makes sense that the constant reminder of them echoes in a lot of what we do day to day, more so if you have even a passing interest in history. And if you do have that interest, it's so easy to satisfy that part of your information with the ample supply of books, TV, movies, videos, and games that all represent the Roman Empire and lodge it firmly in your brain. So, that's the reason. The reason your man thinks about the Roman Empire all the time is essentially a mix of the fantasy, a genuine interest in history, and the legitimate cultural influence that surrounds us every day. I think a lot of people are trying to find a woman's equivalent to this phenomenon in men, and I think now is a good time to mention it's not just men who think about the Roman Empire a lot. This has been a pretty gendered video. I asked my non-binary sibling if they think about the Roman Empire a lot too, and they said they do. But that's someone who, like me, plays a lot of historical grand strategy games. So I do think there's something inherently interesting about the Roman Empire as a relic and as a curio to our modern world that transcends, just being a man wanting to be in a legion. I think that if you wanted to say there was a woman's version of this, it could be Taylor Swift. Maybe the non-binary version is Phoebe Bridgers, or also Taylor Swift. But it's just not the same thing. The trend isn't asking men, what's your hyperfixation of the moment? It truly is an ever-present wistful fantasy. And based on all the reasons I laid out, it makes a lot of sense why men are using this as their port of call in that regard. Anyways, that's what I think. Let me know in the comments if you have a different idea about why this question has been such a phenomenon. If you're interested in another video I made about imperialism and how it impacts your role-playing games, click this video here, up there somewhere. Also, imagine this video might hit people outside of my normal audience, and if that's you, welcome. I hope you subscribe. My name's Ben DeHart. I think about the Roman Empire like 4 times a day. See ya.